Hombre, sí, por fin. Hola a todos y bienvenidos a Directos de Chile. No sabía si estaba en directo o no. Ay, qué estrés, Dios mío. Me he decidido hacer un director sorpresa porque llevo estos 2 días, ayer y hoy, viendo la conferencia que está teniendo lugar en Estados Unidos, Strategy World, y conferencia a la que me hubiese gustado asistir personalmente, pero por otros compromisos que tenía por estas fechas no ha podido ser, no he podido ir a Orlando a ver en directo todo lo que está pasando, pero sí que la puedo ver desde casa. Y nada, pues estaba viendo la conferencia, ahora van a salir los chavales de True North, que son los que son la base fundamental de toda mi tesis sobre strategy, es la fuente de todo mi análisis cuantitativo y básicamente son la gente que es pionera en este sector en Estados Unidos. Y bueno, pues han llegado a lo más grande. Ahora están a punto de tener una charla con Sailor. Y para mí es un honor estar aquí en directo para escucharlos. Y tengo muchas ganas de escuchar lo que tienen que decir. Estamos viendo muchas noticias muy buenas en el día de hoy. Tenemos a Scott Bessent haciendo declaraciones muy favorables a Bitcoin en el Senado. Hemos recibido noticias de que ya tenemos la primera reserva estratégica de Bitcoin en Estados Unidos. Va a ser en el estado de New Hampshire. Parece que la firma de Cantor Fitzgerald está empezando un proceso de adquisición. Es que son dos. Es Strive Asset Management, por un lado, y por otro lado Cantor, que está con la empresa esta no es 21, pero en definitiva parece que se están generando una serie de empresas cuyo modelo de negocio es absorber empresas que tienen negocios que no son rentables, del tipo empresas zombie, pero que tienen, por ejemplo, más dinero en su columna de activos en forma de cash de lo que es su capitalización, por ejemplo. Entonces, absorberlas, hacer el arbitrage y comprar el Bitcoin con eso. Y estamos viendo eso, pues unas noticias muy locas, porque claro, tened en cuenta que todo esto al final es un mogollón de demanda que se acumula encima ya de la demanda existente que tiene Bitcoin actualmente. Si tenemos en cuenta que Bitcoin se minan, creo que son 3.150 a la semana, y la demanda no está más que creciendo, 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 y no se minan más Bitcoin a lo largo del tiempo, pues al final ese Bitcoin tiene que salir de las mesas OTC, como ya he mencionado muchas veces en el canal. Y si sale de las mesas OTC, si sale de, digamos, estas fuentes de Bitcoin donde hay una piscina en la que tirar, pues en algún punto esas piscinas se van vaciando y ese Bitcoin se va retirando. Entonces, super bullish porque es eso. O sea, en cuanto haya un desequilibrio entre oferta y demanda, pues vamos a acabar viendo cómo Bitcoin tiene que ajustar necesariamente el precio. A pesar de que no estamos viendo ese ajuste todavía, va a tener esa obligación de ajustar el precio antes de que se acabe ese suministro, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, tengo aquí el stream abierto en directo de Strategy World. Acaban de irse a una pausa, pero se supone que ahora en un par de minutos salen los chicos de Quant Bros, los chicos de... Quant Bros es el canal antiguo. De MicroStrategy True North, exactamente. Es que es que... MicroStrategy, no, de Strategy True North. ¿Os dais cuenta la cantidad de cambios de nombre que hay aquí? Yo creo que algún día la gente sabrá que yo llevo aquí mucho tiempo porque diré MicroStrategy. Y la gente dirá, ¿qué es MicroStrategy? ¿Por qué dices MicroStrategy? ¿Qué quieres hacer? ¿Que suene más guay? No, no, es que se llamaba MicroStrategy hasta hace nada. Pero, claro, mucha gente que entra nueva pues la conoce con el marketing nuevo, con el branding nuevo, con ese nuevo logo Strategy, ¿no? Y el Bitcoin y directamente conocen a la empresa así. Lo que no saben es que había una empresa antes que se llamaba MicroStrategy. Y que algunos llevamos en este juego ya más tiempo del que nos gustaría admitir aquí metidos en el agujero del conejo, ¿no? De Alicia en el País de las Maravillas, ¿no? Pues entrando ahí en el agujero de Bitcoin que cada vez es más profundo. Oye, por cierto, ¿hay alguien en mi directo? No he mirado si hay alguien por ahí. A ver. Hola, Borja. Borja, qué crack, tío. Borja, no te pierdes una, tío. No te pierdes una. Eres Hermejo. ¿Cómo hacen esos tratos de compra de Bitcoin? ¿Te refieres al OTC? Pues básicamente cuando tú entras en un exchange, si tú quieres vender Bitcoin, no te dejan vender más de 20, por ejemplo, creo que es ahora en Coinbase, de una tanda. Entonces al final, pues esos son acuerdos privados y que salen del mercado. Yo no sé exactamente cómo están estructurados. Lo que sí que sé es que, bueno, pues son acuerdos entre grandes entidades, y hay unos intermediarios, y hay unas mesas. Esas mesas al final es un tío en una empresa que tiene un ordenador y contactos al final. Y básicamente hay gente que lo procura, pero no sé muy bien los detalles, no lo tengo tan estudiado. Bueno, pues vamos a ir poniendo el stream. A ver. ¿Estamos en directo? No. A ver. Uy, ya han empezado. Pues voy a compartir el stream. A ver si puedo. Voy a poner yo un chiquitito aquí. Exactamente. Ahí estamos. Qué ilusión.
If you mean crypto like Bitcoin, I've always said it's a fraud.
I do think it's worth looking
Jamie
at this
Dimon,
crypto thing a little bit, only because it is a deeply, deeply old-fashioned, simple scam at this point.
Describe it as a Ponzi scheme?
Yes, it's a Ponzi scheme.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
Sell my Bitcoin right into this rally.
Care less what Bitcoin trades for, how it trades, why it trades, who trades it. If you're stupid enough to buy it, you'll pay the price for it one day.
It's like when there was the Beanie Baby craze in the late 90s.
MicroStrategy's entire business model is a ticking time bomb.
If you're willing to take a risk in crypto at this point with MicroStrategy's ticking time bomb ticking underneath you,
more money they can raise and then buy more Bitcoin, like a flywheel effect. That's
There's
insane.
a lot of fraudsters and hucksters and scam artists.
Volatility is like fire, and some people run away from the fire, but Henry Ford put the fire into a carriage via an engine, created an entire industry, and he gave humanity wings.
MicroStrategy adding to its Bitcoin.
Ahí lo tenemos.
Nobody right now is rattling
Ben
the cages
Berman,
of traditional Wall Street more
Jeff
than Michael
Walton,
Saylor.
We beat every
Grain of
single
Salt.
company in the S&P index.
¿Qué hay? Tim Kotzman, el que me da los likes en Twitter. Dan Hillery. Adrian Morri.
Bitcoin's been a wild run, and boy, have you been right.
That's the brilliance of the
Qué grandes.
engineering. Can a human being make something that other humans can't corrupt?
Please welcome back to the stage your host, Natalie Brunell.
Wow, that just gets you fired up, right? And we still have so much work to do when it comes to mainstream media. That's the world I come from. I'm so excited to introduce this fireside chat with the MSTR True North community and two visionary leaders. But first, I do want to share a little bit of a personal anecdote that's very relevant to this. Because strategy has empowered so many people and families to truly achieve financial freedom, to retire early, and to grow their families. And I actually have two friends from high school that attended this conference this year. I will not share their names, I'm gonna protect their privacy. But they said that some of my earliest interviews with Michael Saylor helped them gain conviction in strategy to make that their primary family investment. And that has allowed them to have the financial security and the flexibility to expand their family. So not
Natalie, das igual, tía.
empowering companies. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Jeff Walton, Tim Kotzman, and Ben Workman, who are the driving forces behind MSTR True North, a leading platform dedicated to analyzing Bitcoin treasury strategies and corporate finance
Los
innovation.
analistas de la corbata naranja. ¡Bravo! Y el gigachat,
And of course, they really need no introduction, but the visionary, the superb, the superior, the brilliant Executive Chairman Michael Saylor and CEO Phong Le. Please welcome them to the stage.
Una panda de genios, aquí sentados todos juntos. Uf, qué pena no haber ido, tío. De verdad. Tendría que haber ido, joder.
We are back.
We are back.
We are on stage here with some of our favorite people, and we are excited to share an hour and ask a few questions and really dive into things a little bit more. So this is the first time we're actually on stage with Michael and Phong, and man, look at all the people in here. Wow, holy cow. All right, this is exciting. So maybe we'll just kick it off. A quick question over to Phong and Michael. So
Los
over the
nota
last
con las
couple of days, we
corbatas
talked
con los logos de
this
Bitcoin.
digital transformation of investor relations. And prior to what we're seeing today with this community, the investor relations page was the most boring page on a company's website, right? Nobody ever went to the investor relations page. Nobody went and scoured all the documents, but now people are. And people are because we're talking about it. We're talking about this evolution of an equity and how a company can be formed. So I'd love if you can expand on this concept of the digital transformation of investor relations and really kind of dive into that a little bit further.
I can start. The funny thing, and I think Eric Semler talked about it yesterday, about being a zombie company and a company that nobody's interested in. I had mentioned yesterday we had 40 investors on our earnings calls, 10 of which were employees and board members. The other thing is we had no investor relations person. I was the CFO and I was investor relations. And I remember talking to investors and like, you should really hire an investor relations person. And I was like, to talk to 30 people, it didn't make a lot of sense. And Shirish Jodia we hired in 2022 to be our first head of investor relations. And I still remember we had 2 people who were our final candidates. And one person was really nice, super guy from Texas who'd done investor relations for like 15 years. And he had 0 knowledge about Bitcoin. And then we had Shirish, who hadn't done investor relations for very long. I think it was like 2 years or so for a local energy company. And he's like, I love Bitcoin. I sought you guys out. I looked you up. I like, this is my job. And of course, Shirish got the job. And then we realized after that, Mike went from like 50,000 X followers to 1 million to 2 million to 3 million, got a huge voice. And we realized that was really the next digital transformation of investor relations in 2023 or so, was to use our X handle. Because when you have a story that's extremely misunderstood by traditional finance, you need an amplifier outside of traditional finance. We need an amplifier beyond just sort of the way you would normally do things. And so the X handle was the next big sort of really digital transformation of investor relations. And then the biggest gift beyond that is everyone started producing content that we didn't even know we needed, right? Like charts were being created, videos were being created, 10 p.m. sessions of people talking about strategy for 2 hours on end are getting created. And how else do you amplify an organization of 0 IR people to 1 IR people to 1,000 to 1 million? This is the way to do it. And it's just fantastic. And you realize that all of that is because we tapped into the zeitgeist of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is what caused the digital transformation capital. But of investor relations, there's no better way to do investor relations than this way. And it makes so much more sense than sitting and talking to, in a converted hotel room in a non-deal roadshow with 4 Harvard MBAs, sorry, CJ, that asked you questions at the age of 27 about your business and want to steer you to go do something like they understand software. That's not investor relations. This is investor relations.
I think we benefited, we were catapulted into a digital transformation by COVID and by the crypto community. And I gotta say, we were taken there kicking and screaming. And maybe that's the only way you get there, but as Fong said, the 20th century way to do things is you go meet people face to face. I remember I've spent 1 month flying around the world, and like an entire month of my life, $1 million of travel fees in order to stand in front of 100 people in a room 20 times, and basically deliver a 1-hour message to 2,000 people cost $1 million, and that was quote unquote best practice in the year 2018. So something profound happened. You know, and when the lockdowns came, you don't get to travel, you don't get to meet face to face, and then you have to do remote, and then you have to embrace something like Zoom. And we used to have, I mean, Fong's being generous. I remember, okay, I'm going to tell him myself here. I went through a phase when I just decided I was kind of a little bit irked with the investor community, so I canceled conference calls and earnings reports for 10 years in a row. There's a period about, I don't know, like 40 quarters where we didn't do an earnings call. And then there was when we came out of that phase, we had a lot of goodwill with our investors, obviously not.
Not.
And then the best practice was sit in a conference room with one of those like speaker phones, and we'd all look at each other and we'd punch the speaker phone and we'd dial in, and there were like 19 people. I remember 19 to 20 people being on the call and one of them being an investor.
19 personas,
and the other 19 working
Mira
for the
ahora,
company.
qué locura.
That was my recollection. There might have been a couple. So we had that dark period, and then COVID came along and the lockdowns hit, and we went from speaker phones to, 3 different video conferencing things, and then we landed on Zoom, and then we started to have Zoom meetings, and then we tried to have an employee meeting. We realized we had to have the employees join online with a webinar, and so we discovered webinars. Then we thought, well, if we're going to have 1,000, then we started trying to figure out how to sell things to customers, and we had to do that. And so we were forced to adopt technology for customer activity after 2020. And once you get there, it's a hop, skip, and a jump to, well, if we're going to do Zoom webinars for customers, then why don't we do a Zoom webinar as an earnings call and put the video on it? And we evolved from there eventually. And I would say we were catalyzed by COVID. We had to do that stuff. And then, of course, we needed Bitcoin. We found Bitcoin because of the war on currency that came with the war on COVID. And then after that, we were all of a sudden in the arms of the Bitcoin community. And I'm going to say crypto.
The war on currency that came with the war on COVID. O sea, lo que está diciendo es... Hay que diseccionarlo. Está hablando de la guerra sobre la moneda que vino con el bicho. La emisión monetaria sin límites.
Crypto too, although people don't always love when I use the word crypto, but we're rehabilitating crypto. It's going to be a better word going forward. And the learning from that is this: everybody in the crypto community was launching these tokens, and they were doing investor education on tokens, and they had to do them via YouTube and via Twitter. And so when I got involved with Bitcoin, I saw all these YouTube podcasts, and you would see all the Bitcoin podcasts, but you see every kind of podcast, and then you started seeing all these crypto influencers, and they're reporting on their favorite crypto token just like it's CNBC in real time. And some of them have 500,000 followers or more. So I started looking at what they were doing, and then we realized that you have to go do podcasts. you know, we started doing some of these podcasts, and we started posting. And I remember when I started posting, I was very clumsy. Everybody, when they first discover X, well, when they first discovered Twitter, used to be before it was X, everybody's very clumsy, and you do silly, stupid things. And I watch all the newbies come into space, and they don't tweet well, and I cringe, and I'm like, don't do it that way. Like and I remember Samson Mow, if anybody knows Samson Mow, great Bitcoin maximalist, you know, he took me under his wing when I started tweeting, and he goes, you know, Mike, you posted this, there's no social preview. And I'm like, well, Samson, what's a social preview? I'm like, well, like, there's no image showing up on your URL. And I'm like, an image on the URL? It's like, he says it's an ugly string of letters. So I got on the phone to my marketing people, like, what's a social preview? Put a social preview on the URL. And so when we got into it, we just started getting educated by the community. This is how you share. This is how you post. Like, I even sit with executives today, and and I'll say, okay, first you're going to go on CNBC. Then you're not going to not tell anybody. You're going to go on CNBC. You're not going to wait 2 days and post an ugly URL that links to a partial extract of you on CNBC. You're going to go on CNBC. You're going to get your talking points right. You're going to extract a video. You're going to put an MP4 file. You're going to upload the MP4 file. You're going to write this, right?
No me puedo creer que tengan que enseñarle esto directivo,
That's going
en
to
serio.
be seen by 10 or 20 times as many people as saw you on CNBC. And if they agree with what you said, they're going to grab the handle and they're going to message it to their boss or investor or board of director or whatever best friend and say, you got to check this out. And that kind of was like a 4-year journey to realize that you have to articulate the message. You have to put it on the channel. I remember we got on YouTube, and I would do this interview on YouTube, or someone would interview me on YouTube. And first I didn't know what I was doing, and then I got lucky, and then I got things like the Lex Friedman podcast. And Lex interviewed me for 4 hours, and then he posted it, and it runs like 10,000 times a day. Like, the residuals are 10,000 people a day spend 4 hours with me listening to what I have to say many years ago. You watch that, and then you watch people, they'll post things, and I'm seeing them, they'll interview me on Bitcoin, and they'll post, world coming to shattering end COVID problem, yo-yo dying. And I'll call them, you know, that's going to run better if you put my full name in the title and something Bitcoin, because Bitcoin really works well with the algorithm, and my name will work well with the algorithm. And so I think I went from, I was never on YouTube, I was never on television, I didn't think to post, to stumbling around and making all the rookie mistakes, to starting to learn a bit, and then realizing that the real power is articulate your message, make it easy to consume, put it in different formats. Some people want 30 seconds, some people want 5 minutes, some people want 20 minutes, some people want an hour. And whatever it is, give them the handle, because what will happen is 9 months from now, they'll want to send it to 97 people. And if they can do that in a couple of seconds, your message will spread virally. And don't make it hard. Make it easy. Make it like when you write a paragraph, think people will read the first sentence. When you write a sentence, think people might read the first 3 words. When you write 3 words, obsess over the punctuation of the 3 words, right? That's how I think now, right? And I didn't think at all like that before 2020.
When you think about your equity, and you guys really did something special when you embraced volatility in the market, but when you have a lot of investors, that's often scary for them. It used to always be equated with risk. And one of the big themes that we've seen from the retail community as we've been talking to everybody in the hallways here is that the constant education and the messaging that you guys do empowers the retail community to amplify it further and build conviction. So we've been playing around with the concept of retail being a partner and what we're calling conviction as a service, where you guys enable us with enough information that we can distill and then we can find ways to communicate that out further to other investors who might be starting from different points in their journey and investing and understanding a type of equity like a Bitcoin treasury company like Strategy. What have you guys seen along the ride as your equity is taking these volatile swings? And I'm sure you guys are seeing all the noise on social media, but what I hope you also see is the people that are the calming voices out there trying to help the retail community understand why they're in this in the first place and what it is that makes this so special. How do you guys see that emerging as kind of a strategic advantage for what you guys have built with your retail community?
You know, it's not lost on us that we hold a 2 hours earning call and 2 hours later
2 horas de earnings que me estoy comiendo por partida doble en directo y después para analizarlos.
Dissection of our earnings call and does a pretty darn good job. Because what actually happens in between that is we go and talk to all of our coverage analysts and we do callbacks, right? And we, you know, have a collaborative relationship where we share with them our message, distill it, and they go write reports. And a lot of those folks are here. We appreciate the coverage analysts, of which we used to have one, right? Literally one who had a sell rating on us when we started this journey. And now we have, I don't know, like 15, 12, 13, 14, 15 who all have a buy rating on us. And they do pretty good work. And they publish out these reports. And I would guess maybe 100 or 1,000 people read these reports the next morning. You go, don't talk to us, right? Do a dissection that is pretty darn awesome that evening. You know, you could probably, I don't know if you have a wife and kids, you could be doing something else, but you're so passionate about Bitcoin and about strategy. We don't.
Lo mejor de esta situación es que aquí, aunque no os deis cuenta, hay un bromance entre Saylor y Fong Lee, que están dentro de Strategy, y esta gente. Y lo que nadie te explica, pero lo que me tiene a mí sonriendo es que ellos son analistas totalmente independientes y que dedican el tiempo de su vida, igual que yo, por cierto, a analizar esta empresa, a producir contenido, a hacer análisis cuantitativo, a educar a otra gente y a hacerlo todo gratuitamente. Y ellos, desde dentro de la empresa, toman ese feedback e incluso lo utilizan para redirigir la empresa. Es Saylor y Fong Lee se ven los episodios de True North de esta peña y los toman en serio, aunque son independientes, pero les sirve como feedback. Entonces es súper bonito verlos juntos, porque al final es como que no se pueden hablar, porque esta gente al final vienen del mundo corporativo y tienen que tener mucho cuidado con quién se asocian y con lo que dicen y con todo, ¿no? Con su compliance y tal, sobre todo desde el punto de ahora en que están haciendo algo como lo que están haciendo, que va a ser un seísmo dentro de los mercados. Pero es que estos chavales les están dando un montón de trabajo y yo entiendo que ellos les sienten mucho agradecimiento. Y para mí el ver esto es una confirmación del agradecimiento por parte de Strategy, de forma oficial, a todos los key analysts y toda la gente que está divulgando esta información sobre Strategy. Yo en parte también me dedico a esto, aunque no al nivel de ellos, pero ambiciono a... Bueno, a lo mejor no me voy a sentar aquí con Saylor, como se están sentando ellos, pero sí que ambiciono a servir de alguna forma a explicar un poco mejor esta empresa, además del rédito monetario personal que puedo derivar lógicamente, de ser accionista.
But you're so passionate about Bitcoin and about strategy. We don't pay you, we don't ask you, you don't...
Que por cierto, nada de lo que yo digo en este canal es un consejo de inversión. Me aburro de decirlo, pero lo tengo que decir en todos los vídeos.
Don't ask us. And you know, it's awesome work, and you get 10, 15, 20,000 people that watch it that night, and it's awesome. I mean, and so yeah, like there is the structural relationship, and there is the unintended relationship, and the unintended relationship is 20 times better, 100 times better, 1,000 times better. And I do think it's a calming voice out there amongst FUD, but the FUD has decreased.
Y por supuesto, para ellos que son directivos y que tienen toda la presión de la ejecución de esta estrategia, es lo que él le está diciendo, es una voz calmante, es como gente como los chicos de True North les está diciendo a estos directivos: entendemos la estrategia, estamos a favor, os apoyamos con nuestro análisis cuantitativo, estamos ahí, lo vemos lo que estáis haciendo y nos gusta y queremos más. Y os apoyamos. Y ese apoyo te pones en la piel del directivo en cuestión y dices tú, ostras, es que como están haciendo algo tan diferente, pues oye, el que haya alguien que te entiende, que alguien que pille lo que estás haciendo, se hace agradecer, me lo puedo imaginar.
And so, like, this is the way it should work, right? And more people who do this work, and you do it because you're passionate about the company, right? I think it's awesome. I think it's really cool.
I think I'm inspired, by, the early juggernaut in my career was Microsoft, and the late juggernaut in my career is Bitcoin. And if you're looking for a commonality, it was Microsoft made room for their partners, and Microsoft was successful because just about every techie company on the world, on earth, could build something, build a product, build a service, and work with Microsoft. So they made space for the partnership, and they respected their partners. And I think with Bitcoin, right, the success is it's decentralized, and everybody can choose to engage with Bitcoin in whatever depth, technically or economically or intellectually they wish to. And I think that's informed us. So as we built our company, we wanted to make space for our partners and create a community. And it's very, very clear that we can't do everything. The best marketing isn't done by employees of our company. The best.
Esto me recuerda un poco a la situación que tiene Tesla también. Tesla no gasta dinero en marketing, no tienen equipo de marketing. El mejor marketing que tienen son sus propios clientes. En este caso, el mejor marketing que ellos tienen son sus accionistas, porque somos unos pesados y porque somos bitcoiners y entendemos que esto no es una cuestión de voy a ganar el doble de mi dinero y stonks y Lambo. No, es el cuarto giro, está reseteando el sistema financiero. Tenemos al secretario del Tesoro de los Estados Unidos diciendo que las stablecoins y Bitcoin, que esto va a cambiar los fundamentos del sistema económico que está pasando. Entonces, gente como nosotros, aunque tú estás en tu casa y dices, ¿y yo qué poder tengo? Pues tienes poder, porque siempre hay lo que puedes hacer. Puedes dedicar a otras personas, puedes hacer análisis cuantitativo, puedes investigar, puedes ir a las conferencias, puedes darle la píldora naranja a gente alrededor tuya. Te conviertes en tu propio nodo, no en un nodo en la red de Bitcoin, sino te conviertes en un nodo social de educación, de fomentar algo. Y lo que él dice es muy claro. Ellos no lo pueden hacer todo. Al igual que yo tampoco lo puedo hacer todo. Al final es una simbiosis donde una serie de personas se ponen de acuerdo en algo que es moralmente correcto, ideológicamente correcto y que funciona. Y nos dedicamos simplemente a divulgar, a informar, a educar a las personas, ya no por nosotros mismos, porque al final, vamos a ver, de toda la gente que en esta conferencia, ¿cuántos creéis que hay allí que no sean ya millonarios? Muy pocos. Muy pocos. La gente que lleva en este tema mucho tiempo están todos forrados. Yo espero irme a ese club en algún punto. Yo he llegado más tarde que los que están ahí, pero no lo hacen por ellos ya a estas alturas, sino que lo hacen porque entienden la magnitud del seísmo que está sucediendo.
The best education is done by our customers on the product, by our investors on security. And you just see, endless examples of that. I used to tell our investors on the road shows, I said, our objective is to stay in our lane. We're not going to compete with you. We're not going to do it if you can do it. We're going to do the things you can't do. So our job is to create the security, buy the Bitcoin, hold the Bitcoin, and do that in a credible fashion. You could almost say the most valuable thing in the market is credible, durable, high performance volatility.
Me parto.
And a lot of people have figured out how to create non-durable volatility or non-credible volatility, credible maybe non-transparent volatility, or low performance volatility. But creating high performance, transparent, credible volatility is what makes us a success. And when you understand that, you realize that there's a lot of investors who are very long 30-day call options. And so they have a particular view. Their world ends in 30 days, and they want up. They're constituents of ours. There's another set of investors that are very short 30-day. They looking down, and their universe ends in 30 days. There are the out-of-the-money long call option people. There are the long-dated equity people. There are convertible arbitrageurs, and on any given day, they're either buying our stock hard or they're selling our stock hard, but we're in business with them. There are big people that hate Bitcoin, and whenever something bad happens, they want to put a short on it, they short us. And let me tell you, if you gave me a choice, would I rather have them short my stock or short somebody else's stock when they're mad at Bitcoin? The answer is I'd rather have them short my
en
stock.
strategy, claro.
I never I never want them to lose faith in the fact that I am double long, and I want them to think that they got a 2-for-1 short. So you got all these people out there in the community, and there's someone that needs to be told why it's a good idea to short our stock when you're hating on Bitcoin. And
Yo le
there's
digo a la gente que se ponga en
someone else
corto.
that needs to understand how to sell
Sí, que sea un consejo de
volatility, and
inversión.
somebody else wants to buy the volatility. And you have the long equity investors, and then you have preferred, and you have convertible bond investors. And
Está hablando de todos los perfiles de inversor, pero os digo una cosa. ¿Qué clase de inversor es Saylor? Saylor está comprando calls, está comprando puts, está doble apalancamiento strategy, está... Saylor tiene equity, es inversor clase A, punto. Y lo he dicho claramente muchas veces. Tú tienes varios tipos de inversores y él pues a cada uno intenta darle lo prometido. Los convertibles reciben lo suyo, las preferentes reciben lo suyo, tal. Y él intenta no engañar a nadie y cumplir con todas las obligaciones que tiene con todos sus, con todo su accionariado, con toda la gente. Pero él a título personal, ¿qué posiciones tiene? Él tiene posiciones en strategy, tiene posiciones en la clase A, él es accionista de la clase A. No hace day trading, no hace ahora esto, ahora aquello. Clase A, punto. Y a título personal, yo sé que privadamente tiene unas tenencias personales también en Bitcoin. Creo que está en las decenas de miles de Bitcoin. Y con el dinero que recibe de la empresa, con los salarios que haya recibido, con el vender acciones de la empresa si lo hace, lo que él está haciendo es por detrás comprar más Bitcoin, por tanto empujando el valor de su empresa. Entonces, eso debería decirnos un poco de dónde, además de que él abiertamente lo ha dicho, dónde recae su fidelidad, con quién recae su fidelidad. Su fidelidad recae con los accionistas de la clase A, punto. Entonces yo por eso no me como mucho el tarro con esto.
And then you've got the options traders, and you can never forget, for everybody, you read a lot on X about people trading options. For them to trade the options, someone at Susquehanna or someone has to create that market. So there's a market maker creating that. And it turns out that, you know, there are incredibly powerful forces in the market. They're all doing their job, and they're very good at it, right? Like, you want to know how good they are at it? Just take a stock ticker out, take a Bloomberg or take a TradingView or anything, and then put on your screen Bitcoin, IBIT, MSTR, and track it minute by minute, second by second, and watch the correlation and ask yourself the question, who's making all those things hop? Like in synchronicity amplified in a certain way. And I think that the point really is, you think you know the investor, you don't know you think you understand how the market works, you don't, right? The point at which you understand when you realize you don't understand. Like the market's much bigger than any of us. And so the takeaway from that is humility, right? You have to allow for lots of participants. It's a highly decentralized market. There's so many conversations going on every day in every direction, in all polarities, right? In all languages, everywhere in the world. Yeah, you know, the company could never hope to be able to meet every need. And, you know, our bias, Fong and our bias is naturally going to be long the equity, you know, with a secondary objective of making sure all of the credit instruments are fairly valued, right? That's how we...
Justo lo que he dicho antes. ¿Él y Fong en qué posición están? ¿Están en largo strategy? Por supuesto, intentando que todos los instrumentos derivados que ellos crean que tengan un valor justo y que reciban su parte de la tarta. Aquí todo el mundo recibe su parte de la tarta. Las mesas de arbitraje de bonos convertibles reciben su parte de la tarta, la volatilidad, y él no se carga la volatilidad de la acción. Los que compran acciones preferentes reciben su dividendo fijo y él no va a dejar de darle su dividendo fijo. Y los accionistas de la clase principal pues recibimos exposición a Bitcoin multiplicada por un factor. Y básicamente también lo que queremos es expansión del MNAV a base de una demostración de un modelo de negocio que funciona, básicamente. Y todos recibimos lo que queremos, pero al final él y su equipo lo que están es buscando el crecimiento de la clase principal. Y eso implica dos cosas. El crecimiento de los activos netos, es decir, las tenencias de Bitcoin, maximizarlas al máximo, y el crecimiento del rendimiento derivado de esas actividades de compra. Es decir, ellos compran Bitcoin a mercado en base a una serie de operaciones que pueden hacer, que son el ATM, la emisión de clase preferente que son Strike y Strife, y a base de hacer los bonos convertibles. 4 métodos conocidos hasta ahora. Pues ellos evalúan en cada momento en el mercado cuál de ellos es más acretivo, y ese es el que ejecutan, y no más acretivo solo en el corto plazo, sino también en el largo plazo. Esto viene en estrategia alfa, lo que pasa que me tiene que dar tiempo a sacarlo, ya me están preguntando por ahí, pero entonces, ¿por qué no está haciendo Strife y Strike? Chicos, dame tiempo, esto es mucha información.
Think fair to the credit counterparties, but our job is to make MSTR go to the moon. That's how we think. But, and here's the conundrum, for us to be successful, we actually need people in our ecosystem that don't believe any of that stuff and have the exact opposite point of view. They're the ones making the market on the other side of the trade. And what I learned early on in my career is the fate worse than death in the capital markets. It's not for them to hate you. It's for them to be disinterested.
Que te ignoren.
So Bitcoin started as a peer-to-peer network. It is a peer-to-peer network, but it's also now becoming an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem full of Bitcoin treasury companies, lots of vendors and service providers, ETFs, other products. And the retail audience is definitely picking up on this and tracking it and amplifying it. How helpful is that, and where could it go over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think great ideas spread via word of mouth. And every retail investor, no matter how much or how little money they have, is no more than one step or maybe 2 steps removed from someone running a public company, or someone running a multi-billion-dollar portfolio, or, you know, or someone running a state, or someone running the...
Esto es muy cierto. Cuando ellos tienen este mensaje que le dan a todos sus accionistas, lo que dice es que hay mucha gente que, aunque tú no lo sepas, están a un paso de alguien muy importante, están muy cerca de un senador o alguien que gestiona un fondo de pensiones de no sé qué, y que al final, pues, gran parte de la labor de lo que ellos están haciendo tiene una componente educativa y también tiene una componente de que el mercado reconozca lo que hacen. Y ese es el problema que están teniendo ahora mismo, por ejemplo, con la emisión de acciones preferentes, que el mercado no está valorando esas acciones en lo que realmente valen, porque le asumen una calidad crediticia inferior a la que realmente tienen. Tiene una calidad crediticia muy alta desde el punto de vista en que tiene unos activos netos sobrecolateralizados que respaldan ese crédito, mientras que el resto de empresas de ese mercado, de ese sector, lo que están haciendo es emitir deuda bajo la promesa de que tienen un modelo de negocio que les permitirá devolver esa deuda. Entonces, claro, ¿cómo puedes tú comparar la calidad crediticia en ambos escenarios? Si tienes una empresa que tiene los activos para respaldar esa deuda que tiene y un ratio de deuda bastante bajo y bastante sano, pues hay una cuestión de educación, ¿no? Entonces, lo que él dice es bastante cierto de que tú no puedes predecir cuando difuminas un mensaje la gente a la que puedes llegar, porque sí que es cierto que hay gente que está a un paso de alguien importante. Incluso yo mismo he visto... a base de asistir a eventos así, me estoy dando un poco, me estoy entristeciendo el no estar allí presencialmente, debería estarlo, porque realmente en ese tipo de eventos, sobre todo si te mueves en nichos muy minoritarios, puedes conocer a todo el mundo muy rápido. Y yo estoy seguro que si estuviese allí en Orlando tendría la ocasión de hablar con toda esta gente que estamos viendo en la conferencia, porque ya he asistido a una conferencia así y ya he tenido ocasión de hablar directamente con gente que tú dices, ¿pero con esta persona has hablado? Sí, fácilmente. Y al final es eso, no sabes la gente a la que llegas, cuánta cantidad de esa gente puede estar a un paso de alguien que sí que puede efectuar un cambio real. Aunque tú personalmente no puedas efectuar un cambio, más allá de tu pequeña posición como un pececito en un mar de gente mucho más grande que tú, sí que puedes influir desde la proximidad o la cercanía que tengas a una persona que sí ostente ese poder.
Cabinet or a country or a cabinet department, you know, I walk into a hotel and like, you know, a 20-something guy will walk up to me and say, you have to talk to my father, and his father turns out to be a mega billionaire, right? And he's the retail investor, and his dad's not invested. But I have to tell you that all these retail investors, they're all indirectly or directly driving our culture, and of course, all it takes is maybe 2 iterations before you've gone from insignificant to being 20% of the market, and then once you're 20%, it's unstoppable. The entire world flips. So I think it's incredibly important, not to mention the fact that it's refreshing talking to retail investors because there's a certain honesty and candor and enthusiasm. So I guess and they bring out your best performance. Take any rock star and ask them, would you rather play to a music festival full of 20-somethings, you know, a third of which are jobless, or would you rather play in a nice, elegant tent of a billionaire at his charity ball for 300 of his rich, elite friends? And the answer is they would do that one for free, and this one you have to pay them quadruple. And they come in and they get off the stage, right? And so I think we do it for the people, the masses, right? You're not going to change the life of the institutional investor. You're like 2% of their portfolio allocation going to 200, up 20 basis points, and they've been trained to be very measured in their communication. But when someone walks up to you and says, hey, you changed my life, I retired, I bought a house, I got married, I had a kid,
Y aquí lo que nos está diciendo Saylor es claramente que ellos, dentro del accionariado que tienen, buscan, dentro de lo posible, el dirigirse o el comunicar su mensaje y atraer a inversores retail como nosotros. Porque al final lo que dice es que para llegar a gente con dinero de verdad tienes que invertir dinero primero, tienes que tener una serie de contactos y que aún así luego para esa gente no representas nada porque a lo mejor te compra alguien participaciones en la empresa, pero de su fondo eres el 0,5% y para él, aunque le estés dando cientos de millones, pues no eres más que una pequeña parte de sus ganancias de ese año. Mientras que luego si se dirige a gente más normal, gente que no está en ese mundo tan élite, pues al final lo que él ve es que puede tener un impacto real. La gente que ha invertido en esta empresa y que ha creído en la misión desde hace algún tiempo, sin que sirva de precedente, porque no sabemos cómo es el futuro. Yo me dedico a cubrir el presente y a educarlo al respecto, pero no de consejos de inversión, nuevamente. Pero la gente que lleva tiempo invirtiendo en strategy, muchos de ellos han generado riquezas completamente inesperadas. Entonces al final pues también consigues cambiar la vida de gente que de repente se puede permitir comprarse una casa, empezar una familia, hacer cosas reales. No estás influyendo en el 0,5% de las posiciones de un hedge fund tal. Lo que he dicho es que él intenta llegar a ese público porque al final también luego tienes a gente como Cantor Fitzgerald y llega y hacen badabam y el 40% de las posiciones de la empresa, mega empresa financiera del secretario del comercio estadounidense, actual secretario del comercio, está en strategy. El 40%. O sea, pedazo de posición ahí. Y luego aparte están empezando 21. Ese hombre va a hacer dinero, vamos, una locura. Con razón decía hace unos meses aquello de yo solo sé que tengo cientos de millones en Bitcoin y algún día serán billones. Es como, cabrón, claro. Si es que estás en toda la salsa.
You know, you meet someone, they say, yeah, I was able to move to the Caribbean and I lived there permanently because of you, right? That's much more motivational, I think. So if you're saying, like, why do you do it, right? Well, you do it in theory to make the world a better place, but, or, you know, you like to make people money, but you really like to make retail investors money because it's their money. Whereas when you're making the institutional investor money, it's going through 3 layers before it eventually ripples to a nameless, faceless, institutional, whatever organization. It doesn't have the same emotional appeal.
I mean, I'm surprised more public companies haven't embraced social media generally, and X specifically. Right? It started with athletes and musicians, said, well, I want to get out to my fans. And rather than go through a publicist, I'm going to go direct to them. And technology provided a way for do that. Politicians, rather than going through a PR person, said, I'm going to reach out in a public town square, like they used to do, and go talk to their constituents. And what better way to do that than via social media? It's the same concept with investor relations and corporations who are really funded by the trust primarily of retail and institutions. Why wouldn't we get out to our retail shareholders via the same avenue and skip and bypass the middleman? And the answer, the reason why more aren't doing it is because of friction, concerns, risk, legal, because it makes total sense, right? And it's not even just in a Bitcoin community. I think if you want to access your shareholders, this is the way to do it. And Mike's right, it just feels so much better. Like, trust me, like, none of our institutional, like, you know, holders, and they're awesome, are coming up to you at an event with their wife or husband and saying, you changed my life. No one's saying, I was able to have more kids because I invested. Like, nobody on the institutional side, and that's just, yeah, it makes you feel good. It's inspiring. Why wouldn't you do that? And I'm sure that happens to athletes and marketers and influencers and politicians. It's such a great forum to get outreach to folks, and Bitcoin amplifies that. But you know, you ask this question, like, I love what True North is doing, the digital transformation of investor relations. Like, yeah, our advice number 1 is buy Bitcoin and put it on your balance sheet to any corporation. But if you're not going to do that, at least use social media to get out to your investors. Like, why wouldn't you want to do that? And as a retail investor, why wouldn't you want to see the raw representation of the executive team that you're investing in, versus the extremely filtered, curated, prepared remarks at,
Lo que ellos están diciendo tiene todo el sentido del mundo. ¿Por qué si eres parte del equipo directivo de una empresa tienes que poner detrás de una muralla de cristal y de edificios y rascacielos en tus oficinas elitistas y solo te diriges a la gente una vez al año y básicamente midiendo cada palabra que dices? Lo que ellos están promoviendo es lo contrario, es ser figuras relativamente públicas, hablar con la gente, responder preguntas, crear este tipo de eventos, recibir notoriedad. Incluso alrededor de Michael Saylor no podemos negar que hay un cierto movimiento, por así llamarlo. Alguna gente lo clasificará como un culto o como una secta, pero definitivamente son personas más mediáticas y son bastante más transparentes y son, al final, como son los que van delante de todo este movimiento de transformación de empresas a tener Bitcoin en su tesorería y la transformación, la digitalización del capital, etcétera, lo que estamos hablando, pues al final ellos intentan ser transparentes y parte del ejercicio de transparencia es estar ahí todo el tiempo y hablar abiertamente sobre lo que haces y con quién te asocias y todas tus actividades corporativas. Entonces ellos, otra cosa que están haciendo muy bien desde mi punto de vista, es todo el tema de imagen corporativa. Han hecho bien en cambiar el nombre a algo más sencillo, Strategy. ¡Pum! Sencillo del tirón. A mí al principio no me gustaba tanto, pero cada vez me gusta más. Con el logo de Bitcoin, un logo reconocible, que vaya como va ahora, ¿no? Este hombre con el Bitcoin aquí. Estamos orgullosos de lo que estamos haciendo. Este es el proyecto que apoyamos. En cuestión de imagen corporativa están haciendo un trabajo. En cuestión de comunicación, perfecto. Todas las semanas yo sé cuánto Bitcoin ha comprado Strategy. Como accionista estoy perfectamente informado de todo lo que pasa, del rendimiento que están obteniendo semana a semana, de la cantidad que van comprando. Yo como accionista no me actualizan cada trimestre, que va, me actualizan continuamente sobre todo lo que hace la empresa. Yo lo sé al momento. Entonces ese ejercicio de transparencia también ayuda a mantener una base de inversores convencidos e incluso que son fieles a un movimiento o que están incluso dispuestos a corregir esa desigualdad que hay en el mercado de información, básicamente, porque tú te ves un outlet de noticias tradicionales y te dicen MicroStrategy ha publicado unas pérdidas de 5,6 mil millones de dólares después de adoptar el nuevo estándar de contabilidad. Es como, tío, el que ha escrito esta noticia no tiene ni idea de lo que está hablando. Que se vea Estrategia Alpha, a ver si se entera.
Mike's got some guts here, right? Like when I joined 2015, I still remember, right? Like I was CFO and IR guy, so I wrote the earnings script and I would read the script that said basically nothing. And Mike would just go ad-lib the thing, which people don't really do. And then I remember once we were like, hey, Mike, I'm going to give you some bullet points. And he's like, okay, yeah, I'll take your bullet points. He went completely off script. And then after that, I was like, well, I'm going to just write you something. And he didn't read any of it, right? But that's sort of how this should work. Like, you don't really want to hear the scripted, prepared remarks that were recorded 1 week in advance to the earnings call. That's not a investor relationship, right? You want to hear the raw remarks, the raw emotion, and that's what the retail investors want to hear from someone they're going to put their life savings into. I think it makes complete sense.
So, you guys have created these new novel products that the market has never seen before, right? Strike and Strife, and people are beginning to see the value of these products. And, we've been trying to track what's going on there and how these can potentially change the world of finance. And so I kind of got a two-part question. What can we as True North do, and what can everybody else in this room as an audience that's kind of experiencing this do to help? Where can this potentially go? What do you see this looking like in 3 to 5 years? How does it change the world of finance so we can get there?
Yeah, well, I would say a lot of the energy in the Bitcoin community has always been about how do we fix the money and how do we explain to people why Bitcoin fixes the money, And I think that's been going on for 15 years, and there's an incredible amount of really good content there. What people, I think, misunderstand about our mission at Strategy is we're not here to fix the money because Bitcoin did fix the money. We're not even so much trying to convince you that Bitcoin works. I think we've crossed that inflection point. I think when the President of the United States, created the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, and when David Sachs says Bitcoin is digital gold, I think it became clear that the establishment has accepted the idea that Bitcoin works.
Totalmente. A estas alturas de la película está claro.
Capital markets. And so here's the mission. The mission is $100 trillion worth of equity.
Lo que están diciendo es que ya, digamos que está claro lo que va a pasar con Bitcoin. Desde su perspectiva, ¿no? Está claro lo que va a pasar con Bitcoin, que va a haber una ola de adopción, que efectivamente ya el propio presidente está todo el rato promoviéndolo, el hijo del presidente promoviéndolo, estados soberanos hablando del tema y bueno, ya prácticamente. Entonces él dice que bueno, que ahora lo que ellos están efectuando es la transformación digital de los mercados de capitales, la actualización de estas empresas a un nuevo estándar. Y claro, eso requiere de muchas cosas, requiere de unas buenas prácticas, requiere de unas métricas, como ya hemos comentado por aquí en el canal múltiples veces, unas nuevas métricas de rendimiento, es decir, esto ya está antiguo, esto ya no vale. Esto no te va a enseñar a evaluar estas empresas, porque el paradigma ha cambiado completamente. ¿Cómo puedes hacer tú ahora value investing? ¿Cómo puedes hacer tu análisis fundamental de una empresa en el sentido tradicional cuando la tesorería está en Bitcoin? Es que necesitan métricas nuevas. Entonces, al final, ellos lo que están asistiendo es al mercado, están dándoles buenas prácticas, están dándoles las nuevas métricas para hacer esta transformación del capital y también, digamos, que están acompañando a otras empresas. Y eso es parte de lo que se está hablando en esta conferencia también, de empresas que se van a dedicar ahora a básicamente transformar a otras a un estándar digital, a base de darles las herramientas y la educación y los conocimientos para que ellos puedan transformar sus activos en cash, que muchas empresas tienen una cantidad importante de dinero ahí, pudriéndose básicamente, pasar a un estándar Bitcoin y que se beneficien todos en conjunto. Por supuesto, los que lleguen antes se van a beneficiar más. Pero así es como funciona una revolución, así es como se cambia, va a sonar cliché, pero así es como se cambia el mundo, así es como se cambia ¿cómo se dice? El paradigma de inversión por completo. Entonces, pues lógicamente va a haber gente que se beneficie antes, va a haber gente que se beneficie más tarde, y los primeros lo van a hacer en mayor medida que los segundos.
Based on future expectations of currency derivatives, of broken companies operating broken currencies, or weak companies operating on weak currencies. And our suggestion is you can create new equity based on a sound money, and strong companies can actually grow those equities and compete against the Mag 7. That's hard to understand, right? So there's an entire world of equity analysis. How do you value a company based upon digital capital and based on sound money as opposed to based upon traditional 20th century business techniques? And then in the credit markets, we want to fix the credit markets, and that's $300 trillion of credit instruments, bonds, preferred stocks, convertible bonds, sovereign debt. They're all based upon future expectations of cash flow of weak to failing currencies that are issued, securities issued by weak companies. Companies without assets, with weak business. Which companies do you think are there, right? There are weak companies issuing credit securities valued on future expectations of cash flows that are coming to you in a currency which is collapsing in value. They're not good securities. They don't yield.
Y esto es lo que yo había comentado antes, que al final, cuando tú haces la evaluación de crédito de una empresa, y os estoy adelantando el episodio 4 de Estrategia Alfa, porque es sobre este tema, sobre análisis crediticio de empresas, tú al final lo que estás evaluando es, yo te voy a prestar dinero a ti, señor empresario, porque tú me prometes que tienes un modelo de negocio que me va a devolver un rendimiento. Pero al final tú no tienes nada que respalde eso. Yo te estoy prestando dinero y estoy viendo cómo de probable es que el dinero venga de vuelta. Y en función de eso te dé un valor crediticio, en función de quién seas, el tamaño que manejes, el volumen que manejes, para lo que sea el dinero, etcétera, etcétera. Y para eso hay una serie de empresas que se dedican a eso. Estamos hablando de Moody's, por ejemplo, estamos hablando de, creo que se llama Finch, otra de ellas, que se dedican a dar evaluaciones al crédito de estas empresas. Entonces, lo que le está diciendo es, vamos a ver, necesitamos un nuevo paradigma también para el crédito, porque yo, que estoy pidiendo dinero prestado para comprar Bitcoin, tengo el Bitcoin, tengo el respaldo, tengo esos activos netos en mi columna de activos, está sobrecolateralizado. Mientras que el mercado está lleno de empresas pidiendo crédito dentro de un paradigma de crédito donde están pidiendo dinero prestado, esperando unos beneficios futuros, beneficios que además están denominados en una moneda que va perdiendo poder adquisitivo en el tiempo. O sea, es que el propio paradigma, el propio status quo no tiene sentido. Es por eso que ellos están ganando.
Much. The credit's not great. They're not liquid. They're sold in an antiquated fashion. Most preferred stocks, most corporate bonds are sold over the counter, one and done. Short duration. They don't have tickers. You probably can't name a ticker, name a ticker for a corporate bond issued by a major bank in the United States. Now, major banks in the United States have issued hundreds of billions of dollars of fixed income instruments. You ever wonder why is it that a major bank has never issued a fixed income security that you can trade? Right? They're sold through a sales force. How many things, they're sold through a sales force that's 50 years old. I mean, the idea is 50 years old. They're people. They have CUSIP numbers, right? There are numbers like something 199742, and then there's another issue, something 19743. And you can't get the quote unless you pay $25,000 a year to get the Bloomberg, and then you can get the quote, and then there's no market maker, and the spreads are 3%. And that's because why would you ever trade them? What? So that's the state of the credit market. And so we're not here to fix.
Y lo que está diciendo aquí también es que el estado del mercado de crédito para empresas grandes, por ejemplo, está diciendo, ¿por qué no existe un ticker donde tú puedas comprar ese tipo de instrumentos emitidos por una gran empresa o un banco? ¿Por qué no hay ticker? ¿Por qué no hay ningún sitio donde tú puedas, para poder acceder a esto, tienes que tener un terminal de Bloomberg que cuesta $20 y tantos mil, solo para acceder al mercado y poder ver el valor del mercado, y después cuando lo quieres comprar tienes un spread de un 3%. ¿Por qué? Porque no hay liquidez. Porque ¿quién quiere tradear esto? Esto solo se hacen en transacciones de gran volumen entre instituciones, pero tú, inversor retail, no tienes acceso a eso. Entonces al final también es otro cambio de paradigma, donde ellos crean un instrumento perpetuo preferente y permiten que a través de un ticker acceda a cualquier persona, y las reglas del juego son claras. Tienes este rendimiento anual, se te paga este dinero, esto es convertible, esto no es convertible, y ya la gente como yo se encarga de intentar dilucidar qué es una buena estrategia y qué no, y cómo funciona cada uno de estos instrumentos.
Bitcoin, we're here to fix the capital markets. Now, fixing the capital markets means going to people that buy preferred stocks that are illiquid, that they're holding, waiting to die, right? They're waiting for them to whatever expire, and going to those people, they don't even know they own the stuff, and they're getting 100 basis point spread above SOFR on garbage, and explaining to them how they could actually get paid 700 basis points above SOFR with a better credit instrument, right? And like, how is it that our converts can do 60% and the average convert index is 4 or 6, right? Go find, but the unlock is finding people that don't even know, that don't know converts exist, and then of course the market, it's structured. You have the SEC 33 Act, the SEC 40 Act. You have so many rules, and when you decipher the rules basically just cripple the market. They cripple the market, they cripple the distribution channel, and traditional conservative or conventional actions cripple the securities. And so, what can you do? I think it's a educational campaign to the investors of the world to show them, there are more than 100 equities, or maybe you can consider more than the Magnificent Seven. Here's some new equities that can outperform the Magnificent Seven. Let me show you what they are. That's a renaissance in equity capital markets. And then there's a crusade. Well, here's some credit instruments that will give you yield for your retirement account, and they actually aren't risky. Not nearly as, you don't even know how to get them. You don't know they exist, but someone invented an electric flying car with a nuclear reactor in it. You don't have to refuel once in a lifetime. You can buy that. It's cheaper than the normal car. But someone told you that it's dangerous to have a car with a reactor in it, right? So I think that the rate at which the
Al final lo que está defendiendo es que estos instrumentos que están creando son muy avanzados y están muy por delante del mercado en muchos sentidos, sobre todo del mercado en el que se desenvuelven, pero al final lo que hay es una falta de entendimiento, de comprensión, ¿no? Es lo que dice él. Tú puedes crear un coche volador mágico con un núcleo atómico que no tienes que recargar en una vida y además más barato que un coche tradicional. Y sin embargo la gente no lo compra porque le dicen el status quo es que tener un reactor en tu coche es peligroso, ¿no? Un reactor nuclear. Es como hay un gap, pero hay un gap de tanto de atención como de comprensión del producto, pero él defiende que son superiores en todos los sentidos y yo lo veo y lo comprendo y lo comparto, esa opinión, la comparto.
Capital markets evolve. It's really a function of how rapidly ideas disseminate. And I think that's a function of just how adept and nimble and facile the educators are in the market. And I think there's an opportunity for everyone
Educadores
to
como
get
yo.
involved. And of course, the more people that get involved, and the more effective the education, the faster we transform the market. The question is, how fast can you grow? It's really a question of how fast can the capital markets absorb a new idea. And if there was one 60-minute podcast you could distribute that just solved it, then you would just let it run, but there isn't. There's a lot of work to be done in educating and helping people embrace new ideas.
As everybody knows, strategy issues equity at the market when it's proper to do so and accretive. Is a shelf necessary for success? I mean, we see Bitcoin companies, Bitcoin treasury companies coming to market in a fashion where they can't have a shelf for 12 months. Is a shelf necessary for success?
Yeah.
I think you can.
Y aquí la pregunta que le está haciendo básicamente es, vale, vosotros que sois grandes habéis podido registrar estos instrumentos, digamos, pero que muchas otras empresas no pueden registrarlos. Estamos hablando de Strike y Strife, de las acciones de clase B, preferentes, estos instrumentos alienígenas derivados tal, que otras empresas no pueden acceder a esos registros o que tardan 12 meses. Eso es todo culpa de la SEC y del proceso burocrático que requiere. Y lo que él está preguntando es si por parte de otras empresas que quieran copiar esta estrategia, si estos instrumentos son necesarios o no. A ver qué dice.
If you gave me a public company that was a cash cow that couldn't issue equity but it generated cash, it would have extraordinary success just sweeping its cash flows. Here's my list. I take a company, I take the cash on the balance sheet, I convert it to Bitcoin, that's a success. I take the cash flows, I convert them to Bitcoin, that's a success. I take the dividend, I convert it to Bitcoin, that would be a success. I take the buyback program, I turn it into a Bitcoin buyback program, that would be a success. I don't take the company private, but I do an LBO where I lever up the company, so I basically pledge the cash flows, raise private or public debt, buy Bitcoin, that's a success. I take a company that's got a slow growth business that's struggling, and they sell off that business or do an M&A transaction and take the proceeds and buy Bitcoin. You've swapped a zero growth business that you sell at 1 times revenue for a 60% a year growth business that you buy at 1 times revenue. Would you do that trade? Right? Yeah. You could sell this business, pay 30, 40% tax, and buy Bitcoin. You would still be better off by a factor of 100 over the course of a decade. So you can take a business that doesn't have access to equity, and you can do all sorts of capital markets transactions. If you're a private company, many of those things are also available to you. And of course, you can also work your way down the credit instrument ladder, you know, where you could sell forward contracts of your products. You could sell a subscription to your product, roll that into Bitcoin. You could sell convertible preferred. You could sell straight fixed preferred. You could sell junk bonds. You sell convertible bonds. You could do bank financing.
El resumen es que no, que hay muchas estrategias creativas que una empresa puede adoptar para mejorar la calidad del capital que acumula dentro de la estructura, dentro de su balance de activos, y que no necesariamente necesita tener acceso a instrumentos derivados o instrumentos complejos. Hay muchas cosas que se pueden hacer, es lo que le está diciendo. Un ejemplo de este tipo de innovación es Metaplanet, que lo he cubierto ya en el canal. El cómo no tienen acceso a los mismos instrumentos que Strategy, pero sin embargo se han buscado la forma de innovar dentro del mercado japonés para conseguir cosas que consigan un efecto semejante sin tener acceso a los mismos productos.
The world is full of people that found endless ways to do it. You know, Warren Buffett, you know, one of his secrets is he bought insurance companies, right? And insurance companies had investment portfolios, and then he was able to invest those portfolios in securities. Well, you know, the trick is the operating company can't hold the security, but this insurance company, you know, has like one layer, and they get like a waiver, and they get to invest in securities. So he found a very elegant way to grab a float, but the trick is not getting the float. The trick is being able to invest the float, right? And so what if you get control of one of those insurance companies and you reinvest the float in Bitcoin, right? And of course, there's a million compliance and regulatory issues you got to work through. But I can imagine 100 different strategies that you could pursue to sweep cash into Bitcoin, you know, and a lot of product changes to the way you run a product business or definition of a product that would enhance the product. You could, for example, build an insurance policy where, you know, you invest the premiums in Bitcoin and use it to increase the payout on the back end to grab market share. Or you could cut the premiums in half because you're invested in Bitcoin and grab market share that way. And so what you can do is a function of what kind of company you are and what jurisdiction you're in and what kind of entity you're managing. But, you know, again, Buffett showed you that where there's a will, there's a way. And, you know, you have some people that kind of they want to do the simplest thing. They're like, well, I can only do this and this, and so that's what I'll do even though I'm going to fail. And there are some people that don't want to fail, and so they'll think a little bit more creatively. And, you know, lest we forget, you know, the greatest investor of the 20th century, his success story starts with buying Berkshire Hathaway, which is a failed textile mill. So it starts with a failure. And he just simply decided, even though it's a total abysmal failure, he's going to turn that into a shell company to become a great investor, and he did that. And I think that every single operating company in the public market is in the same situation now. every private company is in a situation. It comes down to will. Do you have the will?
Es muy curioso cómo está haciendo un tributo, un homenaje a la empresa de Warren Buffett, a Berkshire Hathaway, y a la figura de Warren Buffett, porque al final es verdad que es el mejor inversor probablemente de la historia y recientemente ha decidido que se va a retirar. Lo que pasa con Warren Buffett es que Warren Buffett define Bitcoin como rat poison, como veneno para ratas, como matar ratas. Y... no, espera, ¿cómo era? A ver si me acuerdo. Creo que decía que el oro es rat poison y Bitcoin era rat poison squared al cuadrado o algo así. No me acuerdo exactamente. Era muy anti-Bitcoin. Y en la última reunión de accionistas, Warren Buffett, donde ha renunciado, creo que fue ayer, lo que dijo en definitiva es que una de las mayores preocupaciones que tiene él es la devaluación de la moneda y la pérdida de poder adquisitivo del dólar. Qué noticia, qué grandes noticias, ¿no? Como si eso fuese algo nuevo. Pero no, que realmente ve una amenaza a la hegemonía del dólar por la emisión monetaria tan rampante que hay y por el hecho de, bueno, lo que he comentado ya alguna vez en el canal, de que tiene que haber un ciclo de refinanciación de deuda, es el ciclo a corto plazo. Esto es un fenómeno conocido en macroeconomía y el problema es que básicamente va haciendo interés compuesto mientras más posponemos el afrontar la realidad, que es que hubo una crisis en 2008 y que no hemos salido nunca de ella. En fin, me voy por las ramas, seguimos.
Well, and do you have the courage?
So I've got a really important question here. You guys did something very unique as a company, particularly at this conference, which is you took a bunch of people that streamed from their basements at midnight on a Wednesday, and somebody convinced you.
Has cogido un puñado de personas que hacían streaming desde su sótano un miércoles a las 12 de la noche. Saludos.
Guys, it was a good idea to let us have a room and host our own conference here. So first, whose idea was that? And then the second one, because you guys have become such fan favorites in the retail community, you might be the only person on earth with a personal digital artist around him. How weird is this for you?
I think it's definitely Fong's idea you're here, so you should... We love you, Fong!
Me la perdió.
Whose idea was that? You guys did something very unique as a company, particularly at this conference, which is you took a bunch of people that streamed from their basements at midnight on a Wednesday, and somebody convinced you guys it was a good idea to let us have a room and host our own conference here.
Sí.
So first, whose idea was that? And then the second one, because you guys have become such fan favorites in the retail community, you might be the only person on earth with a personal digital artist around him. How weird is this for you?
I think it's definitely Fong's idea you're here, so you should... We love you, Fong!
Le está echando el muerto a Fong.
It was my idea to retweet you. But we work like that, which very often, the way it works out is I see something which I think is amazing, beautiful, extraordinary, compelling, novel, and I amp it, and he sees it, and he operationalizes it in the business. So you know, all of the execution is him, and occasionally I nudge him, and then occasionally he has a good idea too.
Look, the idea of Bitcoin, a lot of these ideas, you know, they sort of, there's a lot of gut instinct to an idea. Like when we decided we were going to do Bitcoin for corporations 4 years ago, I was like, hey, Mike, should we do this? And it's like, yeah, of course. Like, it's not like there was this long debate of is it a good idea. When somebody came and said, should we let True North host an event within an event within an event, it might seem crazy, but it was obviously a good idea, right? Those are the easy ones, right? Like when Mike told me we should do Strike. Well, when Mike told me we should do Bitcoin, that took a little bit of work. Strike took less work. Stripe took even less work. By the way, back to your question about how you can help more than you already have. I don't think people understand Strife, and I don't mean how it benefits us, right? Which I think we've explained fairly well. You've explained fairly well. I don't think the retail community understands the benefit of a 10% coupon bond that lives into eternity that you could buy in the NASDAQ, right? I have some neighbors down the street who are in their 60s or 70s. I haven't asked them, but they bought a house.
Y bueno, lo que ya llevamos un rato diciendo es que efectivamente falta entendimiento con respecto a cómo funcionan estas acciones preferentes que están emitiendo estos instrumentos. Dan unos rendimientos absolutamente locos y están garantizados por la estructura de capital, por el Bitcoin que los respalda. Entonces, lo que él está diciendo es que si se puede hacer algo es incrementar la cantidad de conocimiento que hay con respecto a estos instrumentos. Yo personalmente no he encontrado acceso a ellos desde las herramientas que yo utilizo, pero si lo tuviese yo me plantearía migrar parte de mi capital a Strike, esencialmente porque, como sabéis, no trabajo, y como no trabajo, pues al final tengo que seguir pagando facturas. Y el dinero, pues al final lo voy sacando de ir cortando poquito a poco las inversiones que tengo, e ir capitalizando en esas ganancias para pagar mis gastos corrientes. Pero si pudiese tener Strike, es una especie de dividendo, pero con exposición en largo a strategy y con un suelo. Entonces, realmente es un instrumento ideal, pero no tengo exposición a él, porque no puedo encontrar cómo tenerla.
For $500,000 as an investment, and they, they cleaned it up, they redid the yard. We're pretty happy about that, and they rent it out at something like $3,000 a month. And so get $36,000 a month on a $500,000 investment. I'm sure they took out a mortgage. Let's say it's about 3% or so. And almost every year, the tenants turn over. And when the tenants turn over, that house sits vacant for about 2 months. And when the plumbing doesn't work, the guy shows up and cleans, goes in there and fixes the toilet, right? And anyone who's ever fixed a toilet before is not fine, but that's what he does, gives them something to do. And that is the traditional way for people, who have some wealth to make money off of their wealth. The other way is to get 2.5% on a T-bill, or the other way is to buy some mix of something that you don't quite understand. Like, go tell people, you basically, instead of doing all that work, the hobby of buying a house, because that's the traditional way to make money off of your money, go online, put STRF in, put 500, whatever amount makes sense, and collect your 10% forever. And I don't think people realize how novel an idea that is versus all the alternatives out there. Like buying a house is hard. Renting it out is even harder. Maintaining it is even harder. There are many better ways out there now. And if you can help explain that to folks, right, that's a great option, in addition to the equity. And other companies should be providing something similar.
Yeah, on that subject, normally if you want, if you look at that instrument, you're paying like 600 basis points more than SOFR. Normally you want super high yield. You either have to take massive credit risk. You're looking at this.
En resumidas cuentas, lo que está diciendo es que si tú eres una persona que tiene un perfil de inversión, sin que esto sea un consejo de inversión por mi parte, si tú eres una persona que tiene un perfil más conservador y no quieres exponerte a la volatilidad de strategy, estos instrumentos están muy bien. Porque tú te compras, por ejemplo, Strive y tienes un cupón garantizado de un 10% anual, y si la cantidad de dinero que metes es lo bastante grande, imagínate que metes, yo qué sé, imaginaros 200.000 euros. Con 200k que tengas metido ahí, un 10% anual son 20k anuales. 20.000 euros anuales, pagas tus impuestos y tienes 1.000 y algo euros para cubrir todos tus gastos corrientes. Tienes básicamente un sueldo de mucha gente en España. Con 200.000 euros solo invertidos, tienes un sueldo vitalicio. Eso no es una locura, eso no tiene precio. Eso no tiene precedente en los mercados de capitales. Entonces lo que iba a decir es que al final estos derivados funcionan como strategy, pero una versión más diluida para gente que sea más aversa al riesgo, como pueden ser personas como nuestros padres o nuestros abuelos. Yo insisto, porque no he encontrado el mecanismo para tener acceso a estos instrumentos, y no los tendría.
Or you have to take a lot of credit risk on a short duration instrument that will be called or repaid in a year. With Strife, you're getting something that you could hold for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You could gift to your granddaughter, right? You can hold it for 100 years. And if SOFR comes in, if interest rates come in, when you have a very long duration instrument, a 10 duration instrument trades up 20% when the interest rates drop 2%, right? And if it becomes more creditworthy, it could trade up 20, 30, 40, 50% when it drops, right? So there's capital upside on one hand, but the other thing is when you buy these other short duration things, when interest rates drop, the companies just refinance them, they pay them off, and you lose it. So it's very hard to find high fixed income yield in a creditworthy package that's transparent. And we don't need to I don't think we need another Bitcoin educator group, because people have been working on educating for Bitcoin for 15 years. And I don't think we need, maybe we can always do with some equity education, but the fact is $5 billion a day gets traded in MSTR. So it's pretty clear that it has massive awareness. The things we've done, I think, that you could feel it in Fong's voice and me too, I think we're most proud of, are creating strife and creating strike, because we use the energy in Bitcoin and the volatility in Bitcoin in order to create one instrument, strife, which is just a much higher grade fixed income for people that want it. Just a better, maybe arguably it's the best high yield products in the world. I don't know, I don't really think that there is another instrument that's a perpetual 10% plus floating listed preferred stock that's 5x over collateralized. I just don't think you'll find it.
Es que no solo Strategy es una acción alienígena, los instrumentos de los que están hablando son alienígenas en su categoría. O sea, están creando más instrumentos financieros que son absolutamente sin precedentes por lo que lo sustenta, básicamente, que es Bitcoin, porque no hay nada que sustente, no hay instrumentos en el mercado que se alimenten de Bitcoin, como los que ellos emiten. Están creando una clase nueva de activo en cada clase de activo están creando un nuevo tipo de instrumento de inversión alienígena, básicamente, es el negocio de Strategy.
Anything like that in the world. I've never heard of it. So we think we've created something which is akin to, you know, the nuclear-powered hover car, right? And that's cool. And the world doesn't know it yet, but I think everybody's going to like the idea of something which has double the performance that lasts for 30 years on one can of fuel, right? And I think with Strike, you know, what we wanted to do was create something that gave people Bitcoin upside with downside protection, principal protection, and a guaranteed coupon. So a lot of people are scared they don't want the roller coaster of 100 vol, but they're scared to death of 50 vol. And if you say, you know, if you go to the average person on the street, you know, you go to them and you say, well, do you want to invest your, you know, retirement account in Bitcoin or IBIT? It comes from a good company, BlackRock. They're like, well, I just hear it's too volatile, right? The talking heads on CNBC think it's too volatile. And they're like, well, and I need money to live on. Well, what if you get an 8% dividend and you get principal protection and you get a conversion rate, which works out to be like 35-40% of MSTR, which can work out to be 80%. It could be 80 to 100% of Bitcoin. What if you have the potential to get 80 to 100% of Bitcoin and you get the guarantee and you get the downside and it's over collateralized and it's liquid? Well, that's kind of like Bitcoin with guardrails. You know, actually, Bitcoin with guardrails with a living stipend, right? I'm going to give you the Bitcoin vehicle. I'm going to give you a stipend, right? I'm going to put rails around it, and I'm over collateralize it 5-to-1 or something. The creation of those instruments are to onboard a massive class of normal investors that would just like to live happily ever after, right? And I applaud anybody that's going to live happily ever after because they took the plunge on MSTR, but that took a lot of conviction. And the way that we grow this market is we provide the best credit instrument for the most skeptical fixed income investor in the world, and they come in. And then we find this great Bitcoin middle instrument for the normal investor that simply can't handle the G-shock of the fighter jet, you know, when it pulls up, because we pull the stick hard sometimes.
Primero strike, segundo strike.
In fact, of course, if you listen to us on our earnings call, right, the torque, or to your credit, fully torqued Bitcoin, the investment proposition of MSTR is we're going to make it a double, triple, fully torqued Bitcoin, right? If it's a 2x Bitcoin, I'm sitting around trying to make it a 4x Bitcoin. And if someone walks in and says, and I have ways to get it, you know, from here to here to here, and when I think about it, I get kind of excited. You know, I'll say to Fong, if we do this and this and this, we could get to 3x Bitcoin volatility, maybe 4x, right? So that, and there's a group of people for which volatility is a beautiful word, and they get, you know, the Jeff.
El tío, yo me lo imagino en su tiempo libre emocionándose, imaginándose todas las clases de ingeniería financiera que puede hacer para sacar más rendimiento del motor que es Bitcoin. Es que me lo estoy imaginando. Si lo fijáis, está emocionado hablando de esto. Yo me emociono viéndolo, porque lo entiendo, porque lo pillo.
Parks of the world, and they get very excited. And there's another group of investors that for volatility is a dirty word, and most of them are sitting on CNBC, and they're conditioning the mainstream audience every day. And so I think the real key for us, and of course the great irony is the way that we're going to create, the way we're going to be able to pull 4 Gs on the MSTR jet is we create Strife and Strike, and their brothers and sisters, and then we grow that business, and that is an educational campaign because we have to introduce a new idea, a new security. No one's ever seen it before. 50 years in the capital market. Nobody wanted to hold preferred stocks because they were all garbage. So now you've got one that isn't garbage, the not garbage one. Yeah. Now we have the not garbage one, right?
I think Strife is a better name than not garbage.
Yeah, that's why we went with that. He keeps me honest. Sometimes I get too excited. Yeah.
So you've got an entire room here full of a lot of retail investors that are very excited about everything you're building, everything you're bringing to the markets, all the ways you guys have invested your time in educating them and really teaching new courses in what finance looks like even in people's personal lives with all the new products that can get integrated. What's the one thing you would want to say to the retail community that you would really like to stick with them?
All good things flow from Bitcoin.
Todo lo bueno empieza con Bitcoin. Somos una secta. Somos una secta. Vamos a poner una corbata naranja todos. Somos una secta.
Yeah, we're on a new frontier of digital capital.
Otra cosa no puedo decir.
We're hanging on. It feels like we're hanging on the outside of a rocket sometimes, right? I mean, holy moly, fully torqued is right. Yeah. So I guess I've got one more question. And part of my presentation a couple days ago was about the evolution of like the equity market, right? And it's primarily been a function of how fast data and communication can transmit between people. And we're now seeing this increase exponentially, right? We've seen some mania with the GME, and information is moving incredibly rapidly. And we're also seeing the advancement of intelligence, right? And a lot of this conference has been about the advancement of AI and intelligence. How do you see that changing in the next year or 2 years with communication flow increasing incredibly rapidly? What exactly does that look like?
The William Gibson quote is very apropos at this point. He's quite brilliant writer, and he said, "The future is already with us. It's just not evenly distributed. The future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed. What you have is heterogeneous future shock. Ideas and technologies and protocols are rippling through the global economy everywhere, in every different way, but they're manifesting themselves differently on different organizations, different entities, different individuals. And there's a natural rate at which ideas can propagate, but they propagate through various fluids at different speeds, and they have a viral effect. I mean, think of it as any kind of virus. It infects some people and they shrug it off, and others become super spreaders of it. When I was as an engineer, the metaphor that's very powerful in my mind is a shock wave. And a shock wave forms when you have an airfoil moving faster than the rate at which the air can get out of the way. So the speed with which air molecules communicate to each other has a common term. We call it the speed of sound. But it's really the rate of communication of molecules of the air. When you're slower than the speed of sound, you have subsonic flow. It's very easy. It's pretty efficient. When you actually breach that speed, it's like you look that way and I slug you in the back of the head with a baseball bat. And if you're looking at me and I swing the bat, you duck. So if you're looking at me and I'm communicating fast enough, it's just a trivial joke. But if you're looking away from me, I take your head off. And so that's why you don't travel supersonic, right? That's why in 50 years we can't figure out how to create a supersonic passenger jet, because it's so much more obscenely expensive and turbulent to breach the speed of sound. I think you got to think about the idea of ideological shockwaves, like this week of Bitcoin.
El tío demostrando que es un ingeniero aeronáutico, hablando aquí de la mecánica de fluidos de las partículas del aire. Y luego tengo yo suscriptores que me dicen que cuando tenemos que traducir torque no se dice como lo que he puesto. Es que he puesto par de torsión y es un par o es par motor. Y es como, chico, sí, que soy ingeniero, ¿eh? pero no me dan crédito ninguno, tío.
Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Bill vetoed by a governor in Arizona. You know, that's an example where it's going too fast and the governor sees no merit in the idea, shuts it down, and then a Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Bill signed by a governor of New Hampshire, right? So what you're going to see is all these ideas, you're going to look at them and you're going to say, well, this is a great idea. It's pretty obvious every family, right, should adopt this. And it's going to be like, no, no, hell no, no, of course, I'm going to quit my job and tell the next 100,000 people this, right? That's how the idea will spread, and you'll say, well, why doesn't everybody react rationally? Well, you have a heterogeneous market. Everybody has a different attention span. They have a different set of prejudices and biases and a local set of information and political preferences. And the way you know you're succeeding, right? When the central banker of whatever country says, we've decided not to adopt Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset, that means you're succeeding, right? When, in your video, when bankers that run large banks say, I hate it, that means you're succeeding. And the reason you're succeeding is because it's a new idea, it's a shock.
En el punto en el que tú tienes esos banqueros centrales diciendo, no adoptéis Bitcoin, es el punto en el que has ganado. Porque es que si no importase no dirían nada.
Wave, it's propagating, everybody's getting asked the question, they don't want to answer the question, they don't want to address the issue any more than the air doesn't want you to go faster than the speed of sound. And what happens when you break the speed of sound? You get a sonic boom, right? It's very loud. And so the screeching is indicative of the ideological velocity and the rate at which it's spreading. I think you're just going to hear lots of screeching, lots and lots of screeching about all these things, and it would be a mistake to interpret the screeching as negative feedback. When you hear the sonic boom, that means you succeeded as an aeronautical engineer, right? That's a success. And when you get the sonic boom in the capital markets, that also means you're succeeding. That means that everybody in the world is forced to embrace, right, and react to a new idea, and there hadn't been one for 100 years.
Speaking of airplanes, 3, 4, 5 years ago, you often said Bitcoin adoption is going about as fast as it can go without breaking something. Do you still feel that way, or is there a chance that Bitcoin treasury companies can pull that future forward, nation-state adoption can pull that future forward?
Totalmente la pregunta del millón.
I still think it's going as fast as it can go, but I think that Bitcoin treasury companies are every Bitcoin treasury company is a motor on the network, right? Torquing the network, right? And so I think it's bigger, they're going to get exponentially more powerful. Metaplanet is getting exponentially more powerful. Similar is getting exponentially more powerful. We are getting more powerful, right? So I think that they're part of the dynamic that's going to drive the market. But my thought is it should be growing 30 to 60% a year for the next decade. And my long-term forecast is 30%, 29% ARR over about 21 years. So I haven't changed my view on that, and I think that everyone that gets involved, you are a driver, right? Everybody in this room is a driver. Every company that adopts Bitcoin is a driver. Every time a politician advocates for it, they're driving it forward. But you know what? Every single time a politician blocks something or reacts negatively to, they're driving it forward, right? You can't pay for the marketing we just got in Arizona. Right? That's going to catalyze millions and millions of people to say, well, what is this thing? Was that the right decision?
No me acuerdo.
Should we reevaluate this? So I think that
No me acuerdo ahora mismo. Marketing en Arizona. Creo que en Arizona lo que ha pasado es que la última persona que tenía que firmar la reserva estratégica, que era del Partido Demócrata, ha dicho que no. Pero que había pasado la Cámara del Congreso y el Senado. No sé si hace referencia a eso. Creo que había pasado todos los filtros y ya estaba en última instancia ya para que lo firmase la última persona, y era una tipa que dijo no, yo esto no, porque el dinero del gobierno está para invertir en activos especulativos o para hacer experimentos o algo así. Es como una de estas del gabinete de Kamala Harris.
Everything is good for Bitcoin.
So Strategy is the company whose phone is always going to be ringing as new companies start to enter into this market. What sense are you getting that this is really accelerating at a much faster pace than people are thinking?
I think a year ago, there was us. and then Semler and Metaplanet, which are companies with an operating strategy that adopted a Bitcoin strategy. And really, that was just a year ago, right? Came out and said that they were going to adopt a Bitcoin treasury company strategy. And now we're up to 70 companies. So if you extrapolate that out, that means that next year, right, we could be at 700 companies, right? And I think look, success breeds interest. And we're at a time when there is just a lot of uncertainty in the economic environment, which causes companies to ask themselves, how do we create value for our shareholders? And if they go out and they just say, let's look at the top 15 companies in the world last year, you know, number one is Metaplanet. Semler follows somewhere in there, and I think we were number 14, right? Like, you would think that that would cause people to be interested. I think the other piece is you know, a lot of folks talk about the Overton window and what's happening with the U.S. government and the embracement of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, digital asset framework, stablecoin bills. We have an administration who's very supportive of Bitcoin. It makes everybody wake up and say, hey, what is this Bitcoin thing, right? So I think we're early, but I think the acceleration is real. And I think, you know, from last year to this year, right? We held this conference last year in Las Vegas. I think there were about 50 to 100 attendees. This year we're at 300 attendees. And I think in this room, there's probably 400 interested folks, right? Next year, maybe we'll have 1,000. Right, so I think the acceleration is absolutely real. It's exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to beat Bitcoin, so join it. Or talk about the company that's, you know, buying as much Bitcoin as humanly possible, and hey, perhaps we become a Bitcoin treasury company, and maybe we go public and we start being one of those machines in the wheel. Yeah. So, you know, I think we're at time. Should we wrap this up? Should we do final thoughts, pass it around, just like a True North call? Yeah. Maybe we'll start with you, Ben. Some final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, my final thoughts are just being at this event this entire week has just made me so hopeful for so many people, because the number of people out in the halls here talking about the impact that just a single equity and the entire ecosystem built around it has had on them, it shows that the information we share and the way that we share it makes a real difference for people in their lives. And it's one of those things that makes me very hopeful that more people are going to get on board with this mission, and they're going to push forward with telling all the people that they love about what it is they're discovering. This is life-changing stuff for a lot of people, and it's just been so amazing to meet so many of you. And all of our lives have been impacted by Mike and Fong, and this has just been a really amazing experience. So I'm really happy to be a part of this journey.
Maybe you, Tim?
Yeah, all this reminds me of what you posted when we did our programming. We had, I think, at least a dozen, maybe 15 or 20 different countries in the room, and to 15 or 20 or 30 hours to come see you, to come see Jeff. That really leaves an impact. So we really appreciate the support, and we're literally, right, the community power that we talked about on Monday, that's everybody in this room.
Yeah. Maybe over to you, Fong.
I want to thank you guys for what you've done, for not just strategy, but for Bitcoin. And I've expressed this sentiment before, but I feel it more now than usual, than ever. What's great about Bitcoin is...
Me lo tomaré como un agradecimiento extendido a mí también.
Because it represents freedom for a lot of people. It attracts some pretty cool, good people, right? Like, you know, you can't say that about every technological revolution, every capital revolution, every digital revolution. I've met some amazing people here. I've met some amazing people over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's the sentiment that I don't think most people get, right? And being in the room here, you get it. Being around people, and you know, but like, it's just, you guys are great dudes, right? The folks out here are good, cool people who care about their country, about the world, about the economy, and about freedom. And it's just an awesome feeling to be around people who are just good, honest people.
Somos los mejores.
All right, Michael, I'll leave you for last. I'll go, and we'll let you close it out. So some of my final thoughts, I met a ton of incredible people being here. Some of my final thoughts are really trust your gut, right? I think a lot of people are probably feeling a gut feeling in their room, being around so much energy. This is the most innovative company in the planet right now, and I think it's very apparent being at this event for the last 3 days. So trust your gut and upgrade the world, right? If you see an opportunity, take it. I mean, I left my very comfortable traditional financial job and to take a bit of a risk and explore this, and here I am. I never would have guessed that I would be on stage with you guys. This is incredible. So thank you, and yeah, upgrade the world. So appreciate the time, everybody. So over to you, Michael. Final thoughts.
Well, I want to thank you guys for setting this up. For those who are listening to this on the live stream or future recording, I just want to say I'm sorry you can't be with us here because the energy at this conference is electric. I've been to a lot of conferences in my life. I can say that I've never seen the electricity, the hope, the optimism, the enthusiasm that I see here at this conference, in this room, in this community at
Tienen que
this time.
estar todo
And so
súper emocionados.
it reminds us why we all come back together again, and the value of coming together. And then I'll just end with a thought. I said all good things, they all spring from Bitcoin. Bitcoin is hope, and the beauty of Bitcoin is that we're able to create better equities, better securities, better products, better services, better communities, better governments, better protocols, better plans, better strategies, better philosophies, better politics, better everything, right? It just injects a better spirituality and a sense of optimism into the world. And I think anybody that doesn't understand what I mean when I say that, I would encourage you to block out 100 hours of your life and go down the rabbit hole and try to figure out how this can be beneficial to you, your family, your company.
Yo ya lo he hecho, pero si me veis deberíais hacerlo.
Your country. I got to say, I'm just incredibly energized by the community, by each one of you. It's an extraordinary privilege to be on this journey with you. Thank you for your support.
Grande Sailor, grande. Con eso se acaba la conferencia. Bueno, chicos, casi 2 horas de directo. Nada, quería compartir el rato ¿no? Yo me he visto la conferencia entera como si hubiese ido, pero este ratito, no sé, para mí era más especial. Gracias a los que os habéis pasado por aquí a verlo conmigo. Y nada, seguiremos informando, nos seguiremos viendo por aquí. En Finanzas de Chill. Hasta luego, chicos.